say you're Wayne and Norma's oldest daughter, and then tell me, when they were working, when Grandpa was cutting hay, did you ever go out to have a small job with the hay?
And I start now. I have to say who I am?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm Betty Fensel Kinnaman, Wayne and Norma's oldest daughter. And when I was a child, I grew up on the prairie in Yelm with my parents and my brothers and sisters. When Dad used to cut hay from the fields, I was the oldest child, but also the oldest of the cousins. So when his brothers came over to help with their families, I was the oldest. And one summer it was deemed that I was the only one because I think I was 12 and everyone else was 11, 10, 9, 8, a couple 7-year-olds, a 6 and a 5, that I could go with the hay wagon into the barn and breathe the dust, but the other kids were banned, partly because some of them were just too small. So I didn't really have a job, but I got to ride along and sit up in the loft while Dad and Bob and Glenn and whoever else was there put the hay up, and we put it up loose hay off of the tractor and the trailer, not in bales.
So the brothers came out for hay.
Mm-hmm. Hay season for a couple of years that I remember. Uncle Bob
Came out for the weekend.
probably the day.
When you were, what was it like to have a family of 4 kids in that house? And when did you first move up to the shack?
I don't remember. I was about 14. It was after Chris was born, so I was 14, 15 maybe. And with there were 3 of us, and then when Chris, the baby, was born, there was a lot of crying, baby crying at night, and Gina and I were supposed to be studying, and so somebody's idea to fix the shack, what they called the shack. There were 2 shacks that had been built for the workers when they harvested beans when it was a truck farm. And so we turned the one into a bedroom. All it had was a wood stove, 2 beds. And then Jean and I, at the end of the evening when it was ready to go to bed, would tromp through the snow or rain or whatever, and I slept up there until I moved out to my own home. And then the first thing in the morning, we had to come down to the house for breakfast, so it was just a bedroom, but detached.
So when to start the fire?
I think Dad probably got the fire ready for us, made sure we were there. It's funny to look back because we just had but we didn't lock it because we were on our parents' property and that was a safe place to be. And it had a sliding wooden thing. There wasn't a lot of insulation, but all we were doing was going up there to sleep. It didn't seem to be a bad thing. It's just where we slept. And mostly that's what we did. We slept and then came back to the house.
Did you ever get scared?
I don't think so. Dad did once.
Oh.
Because Jean was gone for some reason. She was probably spending the night. And I had a play that I was doing at school. And I had a part and I was practicing. And so I was very loudly, because I could do this in a room that's detached from the home. I was reading my part, all of the characters in this part, which I don't remember what it was, but I was booming out the male voices, and Dad thought there was someone in the shop with me. And he came, and when he was doing the chores, he would go up to the barn, which was on the other side, and he apparently thought there was someone in there with me because he could hear deep voices and my voice. And he opened the door up really fast. I guess that did scare me, but it scared him more to not see anybody there. Just me reading doing my lesson, doing my practice. I thought it was funny because there was no one there with me.
Who told the jokes when you were growing up? Grandpa or grandma?
Mom told the stories, not so much jokes, but she told stories of her life and growing up and Momo's life, so Mother did. I don't remember Dad telling many stories when we were young. Only when he was older and I thought to ask the questions. In fact, when I started doing genealogy with my friends that were quilters, and they got interested in following their ancestors back, and they just knew their aunts or maybe a great aunt. And I thought, well, I know my family history. Momo came from Finland, and that was the first time I thought, well, I have no idea where my dad's ancestors came from. So the following Sunday, I asked him, where did your grandpa come from before he was in Prosser? I truly had no clue. I could not have told you because Dad had never talked about it and no one had asked him the questions until that day. And he said, oh, my grandparents came from Kansas and we're of English, German, Dutch descendants, which is exactly right. His mother had told him that. But I didn't know it. I wouldn't have guessed Kansas. I had no knowledge. And so from that point on, I started to research, and he's right.
Give me the 10-cent genealogical history of Grandpa.
Of the both of them, mother's mother and father, her real father, both were born in Finland, and both you can track them back as far as you can go back in Finland, and I'm in the 1700s with Momo, Jenny, because they lived in the same place, in the same village. They didn't move around. They were there. You can find them in the church records and go back a generation and another generation. So they're from Finland, and her father the same way. My dad's two families, the Vansels and the Perrys. The Perrys were the ones that went back to England into about the 1500s, 1600s. They were there was a ship captain and others that came into England, New England. They were of New England stock. They lived there for 200 years until one of them came out west, and that was Dad's mother's mother, and then came to Prosser. Dad's father, the Vansels family, came in the 1700s, about the mid 1700s, came to Pennsylvania from we don't know exactly where, but the German areas at that time, and then came into Pennsylvania, in Illinois, and lives. A lot of them settled there, and there are many Vansels still in that area. And then one lone person moved to Iowa, Kansas, and then to Prosser, and then the two families married and became dad. And his father moved to Yale.
How did Grandpa's father acquire the property?
He bought it. They lived in Yelm, and I'm never sure why they moved to Yelm. The other children moved to Tacoma, but he walked through the property to his job at a mill up on the hill, and had walked from the home in Yelm up to the mill where he had work, and had the opportunity and the money then, and bought it in 1918 or so.
1918.
Well, they came 1920, right? 1920. Was I too early, Alan?
You have a story about Jean or Chris or Ed?
See, that's what. No,
Grandma?
no. They just don't pop up.
Tell me about staying with Moon.
Oh, when I was 9, I loved my grandmother. She's very elegant. Both of my grandmas were elegant in two different ways. Um, But my Finnish grandma invited me when I was 9 years old to go stay with her. So when I was 9, there was just Jean and Ed. And I got to go for the summer with her and Bill Leskinen, who was my grandpa at that time. That was her third husband. And went to Port Angeles. And it was like stepping into a different life. I was the only child. We went shopping for things that my parents didn't go shopping for, new wool coats. Got my hair cut first time I ever been in a salon to get my hair cut. We would go downtown Port Angeles and shop for things every night. And they had a television. We didn't have a television. And they had a house on the hill above the water in Port Angeles. And every night we each had a mountain bar, the old mountain bar. Now they're small and very reduced in size. These were the original, and we sliced them. So we had like 10 pieces, and we had them on a plate in their living room as we watched the news in a quiet, comfortable house. I always wanted a house like that, and I just I just loved them very much.
Tell a story about reading the book on the couch.
We visited their Finn friends a lot. They had a strong social life, so you would have go to different homes, and I went along, of course. And they had coffee and a baked good at every place we went. And Mumu knew that I had manners, that I could behave myself, so that I would be welcome in her friends' houses. And one of them we went across town, and I was reading Bambi, the book Bambi. And I just remember taking the book and sitting in a corner of the house, of the living room by my choice, as maybe 6, 8 Finn people all talked in Finn, because the reason they got together is they were not necessarily friends from Finland, but they spoke the language and had the common background. And it was just like it had a music and a rhythm to it that was different. And that's my memory of reading Bambi. Very comfortable, very secure, very cozy.
Tell, talk about Bill.
Bill Leskinen, as I grew up, he was my grandpa. And he too was a charming, a man full of grace, who had been a wrestler in Michigan. He'd been a famous wrestler in Finland, we're told. And when he came to America, he wrestled in Michigan. He was called the Fightin' Finn. And I have newspaper cuttings that prove that before he came here. He was a hard worker. He was a charming man. He was the love of Momo's life. That was who she is buried with, and he was the love of her life. He always drove a Buick. He dressed well. They both did. They traveled to Montana, to the hot springs and back. He had a sense of humor, and he loved all of his kids, who were not his direct grandchildren. He loved Ed. He thought the boyka. You could always tell when they were talking about Ed because they called him the boyka, which is Finn, sort of Finn English. He was a very good man.
And your other grandma?
Dad's mother was a good person, an elegant person, as I said. She had been a farm wife, a farm woman, very strong, had a lot of design sense. She made her own clothing, had a comfortable home in Lacey, had remarried Mel Morrow, and he then died before she did. And I would stay at her house also as a single granddaughter. I need to go back and finish the story in Port Angeles when I was staying as a 9-year-old. Did not miss my family at all. I was totally immersed in this older generation. And I think Mom and Dad came like 13 or 14 days later to pick me up. They drove to Port Angeles. And Moo said, "Somebody's at the door. Go see." I was used to doing that. It was their friends that would come over. And I opened the door, and there was my mother and my sister and my father, and I shut the door because I guess I liked the house I was in, and I just shut the door. I had to open it up again, but it wasn't that I didn't like him, it was I just loved where I was at. It was very comfortable.
Tell the story about washing dishes with me.
Oh, when I lived in Yom and my two sons, Momo, a very rare time later, she was married to Albert Koskela, and they came over and he left her with me for a day. He had to go somewhere, and it was very rare for me to see her then, just her and I. So we had this afternoon together, and we had made lunch, we made soup and a sandwich, and we were talking. I mean, Mom wasn't there, nobody was, it was Momo and I. And we went to do the dishes after our lunch, and I said, oh, I just hate doing dishes. And um, I don't mind some parts of housework, but I just hate doing the dishes. I said, what housework did you hate, Momo? Because I thought this would, something I hadn't asked her before. And she said, no, no, no. And I said, no, what do you just really dislike to do? You know, some people don't like to do the floor, and somebody might not like to do something else. What did you not like to do? And she said, it's the only thing I've ever known how to do. So I always try to do it the best I can.